I know, she said. One of us is going to have to go back and claim it all. I know I'm the closest, began Bonnie, her heart sinking. It's okay, said Avery quickly. No one would expect you to go back in there. I'll figure something out. Bonnie exhaled with relief. She hated that Avery was the one who always had to fix everything in their family, and relieved by it in equal measure. Thank you, she said softly. I can't believe it's already been a year, said Avery, her voice low. I know. Bonnie smiled sadly to herself. Time's a trip, man. You sound so ill. A. How is it out there? Bonnie padded across the living room and let herself out onto the landing, wincing slightly at the sunshine. Great! I'm looking at the ocean right now. In fact, all Bonnie could see was the alley below, where a seagull was wresting a pizza crust from a garbage bag. She lived on a somewhat squalid street a block from the beach, in one of a number of ramshackle buildings that still offered cheap month-to-month rentals and were therefore viable homes. To an itinerant community of surfers, students, seasonal workers, aging hippies, and functioning drug addicts, the kind of people who gave Venice what real estate agents called its local color, but who would never use a real estate agent themselves. That's nice, said Avery. I'm looking at a brief. Still? Isn't it late there now? You know me, said Avery. Bonnie did. Avery used work the way she used to use drugs, to drown out the world. Did you do anything to, commemorate the day? Avery asked. Not yet. Have you? Just calling all of you. If we did want to start a tradition, now would be the time. Bonnie blew a strand of hair out of her eyes. What would Nikki have liked? It's not like there's a how-to for grieving. Avery's voice took on the brisk, efficient quality she usually reserved for her clients. Hold on, I'm looking it up now. Bonnie could hear her begin typing. How to acknowledge death anniversary. Bonnie shook her head and snorted softly. She directed her attention back to the seagull's ferocious efforts as it pierced the trash bag in search of more prizes. I think it's just meant to be a gut thing, Aves. The internet can't tell us what to do here. The internet can always tell us what to do. See? I have a list right here. Avery began reciting. Number 1, visit their final resting place. Okay, well, we're not in New York, so we can't do that. Number 2, release butterflies. Bonnie scoffed. Sure, let me just grab my net. Avery laughed. Number 3 is more reasonable. Write a letter, poem, or blog. Poem? Blog? Who are these people? Okay. Number 4 is play their favorite song. Do you know what it is? No, but Lucky would, said Avery. Lucky will probably tell us it's some death metal track just to mess with us. I guess if she ever answers her phone, we can find out. Now Avery's voice took on the flinty edge she used to conceal when her feelings had been hurt, though she would never admit. Bonnie knew how. Hard she tried to connect with their youngest sister, elusive as any butterfly, herself. The trick to loving Lucky, Bonnie wanted to tell Avery, was to respect her need to be free. Let her come and go as she pleased, and eventually, she would land on you. But, as per usual, Bonnie decided not to get involved. Moving on, said Avery. 5, we can hold a special remembrance ceremony. 6, express loving sentiments with flowers. None of these sound like Nikki. I know. Okay, the last suggestion on the list is to take a seat. That's it? Bonnie frowned to herself. That's the whole suggestion? To sit down? That's all it says. Take a seat. I guess we can do that. I'm already sitting at my desk. Should I change seats? Yeah, take a different seat. Sit on the floor. Okay, you sit on the floor too. Bonnie crawled down to the landing floor and leaned her back against the wall, closing her eyes. She could hear the seagulls and her neighbors quietly, arguing, the man repeating, I told you, and beyond that, the slow crashing of waves. The sun glowed golden through the skin of her eyelids. The air smelled of salt and garbage and light. Do you feel like this is doing anything? She asked. I don't think it's meant to do anything, said Avery. It's just meant to be an opportunity for us to remember her and feel, our grief. Fun, said Bonnie. Are you feeling it? My grief? I guess so. I might also just be hungry. She had intended it to. I'll be funny, but Avery was silent on the other end. "Are you?" she asked, tentatively. Feeling it, she heard Avery breathing shallowly down the phone. "I'm so angry with her," Avery whispered. "Isn't that fucked up? I know. I should feel sad, but mostly I just feel angry at her. I think that's normal, right? You should ask Chidi. She would know. It doesn't feel normal. I could hurt her, you know? If she was here, I'd punch her in the neck." Bonnie smiled. "That's a pretty weird place to punch someone." "Well, I wouldn't want to hit her face. Just get close to it so she'd know I was really, really mad at her." "And I get that. I'd punch her in the neck too." "Yeah, but you'd probably kill her if you did that." "Too late." The words hung between them, vibrating. "How are you really, Bonbon?" asked Avery. "How's the nightclub thingy?" "It's fine," Bonnie shrugged. "I'm working tonight." Far away in London, Avery gave a little hum of dissatisfaction. "What are you doing there? We're so not L.A. people." "Maybe I am," said Bonnie. But Bonnie didn't think of herself as any kind of person, L.A. or otherwise. She had been a boxer for so long, she'd forgotten to become a person. She'd chosen the city because it was far away from where she'd been training in New York and seemed like an easy enough place to get a job. She didn't care if she liked it. She was only there to escape. "Living in LA is like dating a really beautiful person who has nothing to say," said Avery. "It's fine for a while because, you know, look at them, but eventually you're going to realize you need to be around people who read books and have their real noses." Bonnie frowned. Had Avery even been to LA in the past decade? How? Could she know what it was like to live there? "I don't know how long I'll be here," she said noncommittally. The only place she had any fighting spirit was in the ring. Outside the ropes, it was easier to capitulate, especially with Avery, whose self-assuredness was like an anvil, anchoring every conversation they had. "You could come stay with us," Avery exclaimed. "I know Chidi would." "Love it. And there's got to be a good boxing gym in North London." "I'm not training anymore." "I told you that." Fine. Forget the gym. You don't have to fight if you really don't want to. You could coach. You could become a sports manager. You could start a charity. Just remember who you are, Bonnie. Bonnie closed her eyes again. She suddenly felt very tired. "And who is that?" she asked. "Well, for starters, you're a women's world champion. I can't even remember half the competitions you've won, but I know it's a lot. You're the strongest person I know, inside and out. And you're my sister. Please. Note that none of the aforementioned descriptors include being a bouncer. Except I am a bouncer. That's exactly what I am." Avery was quiet. Bonnie could practically hear the machinations of her. Mind whirring, testing out which tack to try next. "Nikki wouldn't want this for you, you know," Avery said eventually. So, thought Bonnie, she had landed on invoking the wishes of the dead. Classic. "She would want you to be doing what you love," Avery continued. Bonnie bounced her head softly against the wall behind her. "Sometimes I hate what I love," she said. A beat on the other end. "Even me?" Avery asked. "Never you," said Bonnie, though she knew perfectly well Avery would take her remark that way. That was, she supposed, why she said it. Avery made a noise between a hum and a growl. "Well, I just love you," she said. "That's why I'm pushing you." "I know," said Bonnie. "I love you too." Without the two. It was what Nikki used to say to them. "No two. Just love. Look, I gotta go for my run. I'll call you next week?" Hummed Avery. "You can't run forever." Bonnie changed into her shorts and sports bra and set off toward the beach. She ran 5 miles in the sand a day, then did a series of calisthenic exercises on the bars at Muscle Beach. It was hardly the grueling training regimen she was used to, but it kept her from going completely soft. She didn't particularly enjoy having an audience of tourists milling around, watching the bodybuilders who frequented the place, but it was cheaper than a gym, and she garnered far less attention than the bulging, bronzed Men, pumped up as inflatable pool toys, who spent their days peacocking around the bench presses. She was often the only woman on the bars, certainly the only one who could do 100 pull-ups in under 5 minutes, but she was used to that from the boxing gym. She hadn't played team sports since middle school and had rarely gone beyond surface banter with her sparring partners. She felt, all the social grace of a grizzly bear. On the bars, as in life, she was left to herself, which, she told herself, was exactly how she liked it. Except since she started training at 15, she had never been alone. Not really. A boxer in a ring may seem as if they are on their own, but pan back a few feet, and their trainer will always be there in the corner, taking every blow with them. A truly great trainer sees as their fighter feels as their fighter feels, and the fighter needs that support, relies on it as completely as a child does a mother. It's the secret vulnerability at the heart of the sport, that intimate dependence. And yet from this surrender to reliance comes a capacity for individual resilience that's almost inhuman. Boxers are trained to be all fight, no flight. Bonnie had seen many a boxer knocked flat on her back, but she had never seen one run from the ring. Despite the referee's instruction at the beginning of every fight to protect yourself at all times, boxing required an overriding of one's deepest natural instincts to protect oneself at all costs. Inevitably, you had to take pain to deliver it. The first time Bonnie entered a boxing gym, Nikki had been by her side. She was 15 and Nikki was 12. Their parents had entrusted her to walk Nikki home across the park from school each afternoon while they were at work. Avery had graduated from high school early and was already killing herself with a double course load at Columbia. And 10-year-old Lucky was put in an after-school program while their mom was at work. One afternoon, instead of continuing west from the park to their apartment, Bonnie guided Nikki south with her toward Midtown without a word. By that time, Bonnie had been watching nothing but boxing movies for weeks, forcing them all to reenact scenes from Raging Bull and Rocky with her. She was obsessed before she ever stepped foot in a ring, but their mother considered the sport barbaric and refused to pay for lessons. It was their father, an amateur boxer in high school, who had come out of a drunken stupor just long enough to slip Bonnie the money and tell her to go try it out sometime. Bonnie had looked up boxing gyms on the school computer and picked the one nearest their apartment, which was how they found themselves outside of Golden Ring, a storefront boxing gym of no major repute. It was winter, and the gym's big front window was steamed over. The figures sparring and skipping rope on the other side blurred silhouettes. Bonnie stood frozen outside, suddenly too nervous to go in, but Nikki pushed open the door. It was fetid within, steamy and warm. The air was filled with rhythmic hisses, thuds, pops, and staccato slaps. Bonnie stood at the entrance, her eyes racing from person to person. They were all men, all much older than her, all completely absorbed in training. Nobody even glanced up as they walked in. Suddenly, a bell rang and the noise dimmed. Men dropped their jump ropes or broke from sparring to grab water bottles and towels. Now was the time, but Bonnie's nerve was faltering. Nikki must have known this because she walked over to a tall figure who had just finished jumping rope and peered up at him. His body reminded Bonnie of a panther's. She could see his muscles ripple under his skin as he moved. "Excuse me," said Nikki. "My sister wants to learn to box. Can you teach her?" He smiled down at her, his handsome face streaming with sweat. "She'll want to talk to Pavel about that." He nodded at a tall white man leaning against the far wall. Nikki thanked him and grabbed Bonnie's hand. She pulled Bonnie after her, repeating the request once they reached him. Pavel dismissed the boxer he had been watching on the heavy bag with a nod, then looked down at them serenely. His face was beautiful in its contradictions, a thick neck and delicate curled ears, a brutish square nose set below dancing blue eyes lined with long black lashes. To Bonnie at that age, he was firmly in the category of old person, though she would learn later he was not yet 30. He held Bonnie in his gaze for a long moment. "You want to fight?" he asked. His voice, when he spoke, was thickened by a Russian accent. Bonnie nodded without a word. Pavel turned his light eyes toward Nikki. "And you, little one?" "I'm going to be a journalist," she said primly, "so I'll just take notes." Pavel smiled. You need pen? Nikki gave him a knowing look and tapped the side of her temple. It's all up here. Pavel nodded to indicate this was fair enough. Okay, you, he pointed to Nikki, take notes. He turned to Bonnie. You, come. He guided her in front of the big mirror on the back wall, stopping her about 6 feet away from her reflection. Up close, the glass was coated in a hazy layer of dried sweat, snot, and spit that softened the edges of anyone it reflected. Pavel instructed Bonnie to take a stance. Tentatively, Bonnie separated her feet hips width. You feel good? Pavel asked. Bonnie nodded. Pavel extended one thick finger and pushed Bonnie's shoulder, knocking her easily off balance. He shook his head. Not solid. Try again. Bonnie repositioned her feet so they were at an angle underneath her hips and locked her knees. Solid? Asked Pavel, his index extended. Bonnie nodded again, more confidently this time. Pavel pressed the tip of his finger to her shoulder blade and sent her staggering without effort. Not solid, he said. Bonnie glanced over at Nikki nervously. You got this, Nikki mouthed at her. Pavel pointed at the wooden floorboards beneath her. I want that you place feet shoulder width apart, he said. Now? He showed her how to relax her muscles, bend her knees, and plant her lead foot flat on the floor, then raise her back heel slightly with her toes planted so she was ready to pivot. At his instruction, Bonnie brought her hands just above her chin and made fists. Your knuckles, said Pavel, tapping her hands and pointing up. Always to the sky, now tuck elbows. He instructed her to balance her weight equally between her front and back foot, then check her stance in the mirror. She could not know it at the time, but he was giving her a more useful lesson on gravity and the body than she had ever learned in school. When she was set up, he pushed her shoulder with his finger again. She didn't budge. He circled her, nudging from different angles, but, with her feet planted as he'd shown her, Bonnie could not be tipped. Pavel crossed his arms and nodded. Now you are solid. Bonnie looked over at her sister in delight. She had found, for the first time in her life, her feet. Bonnie never put much store in the concept of fate, but she knew that she was meant to meet Pavel. It was Pavel who showed her how to move like water in the ring. In contrast to the plant and hook technique many other trainers favored, he taught a long-armed jab and move style, encouraging his boxers to flow with liquid agility around the ring. This suited Bonnie, whose earlier dance training and natural energy meant she was happiest when ducking, weaving, and bouncing around her opponent. He schooled her on how to slip punches and hit from a distance, how to plant her feet and dance from the ankles up with swift reflexes that were more protective than steel armor. She could never have known how small the odds were of finding someone willing to even talk to a girl, let alone train her. There were only a handful of good trainers who worked with women in the whole country at that time, let alone in the city. But Pavel had been taught to box back in Moscow by his father, who insisted on training all his children, including his daughter, so Pavel had seen firsthand what a female fighter was capable of. His sister had been a natural, but she'd gotten pregnant young and remained in Russia to marry and raise a family. Pavel, meanwhile, had become a youth world champion, then moved to America to pursue a respectable but not exceptional professional career before a broken eye socket forced him into early retirement. Pavel molded Bonnie into the fighter she was born to be and remained her trainer for the next 15 years. Until last year, she had lived her entire adult life with him in her corner. Here is what she could not admit to anyone, not even, for many years, herself. She wanted more from Pavel. She didn't know when it started, this wanting, but once the seed was planted in her, it kept growing until she was like a cracking pot that cannot contain its plant. The truth was that she wanted him everywhere, not just in her corner. The specifics of her wants were not extravagant, but the very fact of them felt enormous. She wanted, for instance, to sit in a dark movie theater beside him and watch something that had nothing to do with boxing, a romantic comedy maybe, or the new Marvel movie. She wanted to prepare her special morning smoothie for him, then sit in silence with him while they drank it. She wanted to watch him brush his teeth. She wanted him to turn in his sleep and reach for her. He had wrapped her hands thousands of times, but what she really wanted was for him to hold hers. Hold her hand. She was like a teenage girl. She sweated even thinking about it.